7 years ago, my family threw me out like I was nothing. No warning, no second chances. One day, I had a home, and the next, I was standing on the curb with my stuff in a couple of garbage bags, wondering what the hell had just happened. I was 21, fresh out of college, working an entry-level job, and trying to save up to move out. I thought I had time. I thought I was safe. But then my sister Melissa came home crying, and suddenly, my life was over. Melissa was 35 at the time, married to Adam for 3 years. We were never particularly close. Our age gap was too wide, and she always treated me like some annoying kid rather than a brother. Still, I never thought she actually hated me. Until that night. She stormed into the house, mascara running, sobbing like the world had ended. Mom and Dad rushed to her side, asking what was wrong, and between hiccuping gasps, she told them. Adam had been cheating on her. I just stood there, frozen. Adam? Cheating? That made no sense. The guy was obsessed with her. He barely even looked at other women, let alone had an affair. But then Melissa turned to me, eyes red and full of fury, and I felt the shift in the air before she even said the words. It's his fault. I blinked. What? You, she spat. You introduced him to her. Her. Sarah. A girl I knew from college, but barely. We were casual friends, the kind that saw each other at group hangouts and occasionally grabbed lunch if we bumped into each other on campus. She had been trying to gain weight for health reasons, and Adam, being a nutritionist, offered to help her. I made the introduction. That was it. But now, Melissa was saying Sarah was the one Adam had been cheating with. And by introducing them, I had apparently orchestrated the whole thing. It was insane. I tried to protest, tried to get her to slow down and actually think about what she was saying. But it didn't matter. She had already convinced herself, and worse, she had convinced my parents. Mom gasped like I had personally stabbed her. Luke, how could you? Dad's face twisted in disgust. You brought that woman into our lives? I laughed, incredulous. Are you serious? I didn't do anything. Melissa let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. You ruined my life. Mom turned to me, furious. Get out. I took a step back, my chest tightening. Wait, what? You heard her. Dad's voice was ice. Get out of this house. Now. I looked between them, waiting for the punchline. This was a joke, right? They couldn't actually believe this. But Mom was already moving toward me, grabbing my arm, shoving me toward the door. I didn't do anything. I shouted. There's no proof. You're just taking her word for it? She's your sister, Mom snapped. Why would she lie? I had no answer to that. I didn't know why she would lie. All I knew was that none of this made sense. I tried to fight it, tried to talk to them, but it was useless. 10 minutes later, I was standing outside with my things dumped onto the sidewalk, the front door slamming in my face. I stood there for a long time, my mind blank. Then I sat down on the curb and buried my face in my hands. I had nothing. No home, no family, nowhere to go. And the worst part? I didn't even know why. I don't remember how long I sat there. Time didn't feel real. Cars passed, people walked by, but no one stopped. Why would they? I probably looked like just another guy who had screwed up his life. And maybe I had. Maybe I'd missed something, some clue that would have told me this was coming. Eventually, I pulled myself together enough to grab my bags and start walking. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. The first night, I crashed at my friend Jake's place. He didn't ask too many questions, just took one look at me and handed me a beer. I told him the basics, but I could barely get the words out. Saying it out loud made it feel real, and I wasn't ready for that. I tried calling my parents the next day. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Blocked. I went back to the house later that afternoon, hoping I could talk to them in person, get them to listen. Mom answered the door, looked me dead in the eyes, and said, "If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." I barely made it down the driveway before I threw up. The next few weeks were a blur. Jake let me stay for a while, but I knew I couldn't mooch off him forever. I found a cheap apartment, one of those places where the walls were so thin you could hear your neighbors breathe, and picked up extra shifts to make rent. I should have moved on, should have let it go, but I couldn't. I knew Melissa was lying. I didn't know why, but I knew she was. And that meant Adam wasn't the bad guy here. So why had he gone along with it? I tried reaching out to him, but he had blocked me too. That part stung more than I wanted to admit. I wasn't just cut off from my family. I was cut off from the only other person who could have cleared my name. Eventually, I stopped trying. Years passed. I worked. I moved into a better place. I met Claire. She was the one who helped me finally let go of the anger, who made me feel like I didn't need closure to be happy. And for the first time since that night, I actually was. Then she posted our engagement photo. 2 days later, I got an email. No subject. No name. Just a single line of text. I owe you the truth. And attached to it, screenshots. Dozens of them. I clicked the first one, and my blood ran cold. The screenshots were messages. Dozens of them. Some were short, quick little exchanges, casual in a way that made my skin crawl. Others were longer, full of confessions and secrets that had been buried for years. But every single one of them pointed to one undeniable truth. Melissa had been the one cheating. I scrolled through them, my hands shaking. The messages were between her and Evan, a guy I barely knew. I had introduced them once, years ago, when Evan mentioned he was looking for someone to help him with vocals for a song he was working on. Melissa had always been into music, so I figured, why not? It was one of those throwaway interactions that you don't even think twice about. I should have. The messages dated back months before she accused Adam. Flirty texts, plans to meet up, conversations where they laughed about how oblivious Adam was. My stomach churned as I read them. But then I got to the worst part. A message from Melissa to Evan. Adam is getting suspicious. I need to handle this before he finds proof. Don't worry, I have a plan. My mouth went dry. I kept reading. I told my parents he was cheating. They believe me. They hate him now. It's over. And the best part? They think it's Luke's fault. My ears started ringing. She knew exactly what she was doing. She had set Adam up, framed him. And when that wasn't enough, she threw me under the bus too. She wasn't just trying to protect herself. She was making sure there was no way the truth could ever come out. And it had worked. For 7 years, it had worked. I finally looked at who sent the email. It wasn't signed, but I knew. Adam. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the screen. My heart was pounding, but my body felt numb. It was too much, too fast, too late. Then I exhaled, slow and steady. I had my proof, and I wasn't going to waste it. I called Adam. He didn't pick up. I called again, and again. On the 4th try, he finally answered. A long silence, then a sigh. I figured you'd call. His voice was different from how I remembered it. Tired, worn down, like he'd been carrying something heavy for too long. Why now? I asked. Another pause. I saw your engagement post, and I realized you deserved to know. I wanted to be furious. I wanted to yell, to ask him why he let me believe I was the villain for all these years. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I understood. He had been just as much a casualty as I was. So instead, I asked, tell me everything. And he did. He told me how he had suspected Melissa for months, how she had started staying out late, guarding her phone, pulling away, how, one night, she left her laptop open, and he saw the messages. I confronted her, he said. She didn't even try to deny it, just looked at me and said, you can't prove anything. 2 weeks later, she flipped the script, accused him of cheating, cried to my parents, turned everyone against him before he could even process what was happening. I wanted to fight it, he admitted, but I knew I wouldn't win. She had your parents wrapped around her finger. And when I found out she blamed you too, he exhaled sharply. I was angry. At her. At them. At you, even though I knew it wasn't your fault. I just wanted to disappear. I closed my eyes, letting his words sink in. It made sense. It didn't make it better, but it made sense. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then Adam cleared his throat. What are you going to do? I opened my eyes, stared at the screenshots still open on my laptop. I think it's time for a family reunion. I spent the next few days gathering my thoughts. The more I pieced together, the more I realized that my anger, my frustration, had been misdirected all along. Melissa had been a catalyst, yes, but she wasn't the real villain in this story. It was the silence, The lies. The years of secrets buried beneath the surface, just waiting to explode. I called a meeting with my parents. I didn't give them a choice. They could either meet me at my place, or I'd show up at theirs. Either way, this had to happen. The day of the meeting, my stomach was a mix of nerves and determination. It was strange, this feeling, like I was stepping into a version of myself I hadn't met yet. A version that could face the truth, no matter how ugly it was. When they arrived, they looked as stiff as I felt. My mom, as usual, tried to make small talk, but it was forced, like we were strangers. My dad stood off to the side, his arms crossed, eyes cold. He hadn't spoken to me much since the wedding fiasco, and I knew that this wasn't going to be easy. We sat in the living room, silence pressing down on us. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Do you remember the day I told you about Melissa and Adam?" I asked, my voice low but steady. They both exchanged quick glances, and my mom nodded. "Of course, honey. That was the day you chose her side over mine." I didn't mean for the words to sound so bitter, but they did. "You didn't even let me explain. You didn't care to hear my side. You just believed whatever she told you." My mom flinched, and my dad's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to point fingers," I continued, my eyes never leaving them. "I'm here to make sure you hear the truth. Because you didn't. Not then, not now." I opened my laptop and pulled up the screenshots Adam had sent me. The messages, the dates, the undeniable proof that Melissa had been playing both sides, feeding them lies and manipulation, all while pretending to be the victim. "We knew something was wrong," my dad muttered, still not looking directly at me. "But we didn't know it was this." "Then why didn't you ask?" I shot back, unable to hold back the frustration. "Why didn't you care enough to hear my side? You let her walk all over me. All of us. You didn't question her. You didn't question me. You just let it happen." The silence that followed was thick, and it felt like a weight pressing on my chest. My mom was the first to speak. She cleared her throat, her voice trembling. "We didn't want to believe it," she whispered. "We didn't want to believe our daughter was in the wrong." My heart sank, but I forced myself to keep my composure. I wasn't in the wrong, and neither was Adam. But you didn't care enough to see that. You just wanted to keep up appearances. To keep the peace. My dad finally spoke, his voice raw. "I'm sorry, kiddo. I see now that we were wrong. But you have to understand, we were just trying to protect you. We didn't know what else to do." I felt my chest tighten, but I didn't let myself break down. "Not yet. You didn't protect me. You abandoned me. And I'm tired of pretending that everything was okay." There was another long pause before my dad finally stood up. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "What do you want us to do now?" I looked at both of them, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was the one in control. "I want you to be honest. To tell the truth. To apologize to Adam. And to me. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But this was the only way forward. There was no point in continuing to let the past haunt us, to let the lies continue to tear apart what little we had left. "I don't expect things to magically go back to normal," I added. "But if we're ever going to fix this, it starts with facing the truth." My mom nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice shaking. My dad didn't say anything at first, but after a moment, he sighed and dropped his arms. "You're right. We messed up. But we're here now." The relief that washed over me wasn't instant, but it was enough. It was a start. I stood up then, gathering the courage to take the next step. "I'm going to talk to Adam," I said. "We still have a lot to work through, but it's time we do it together." As I walked to the door, I felt a weight lift off me. This wasn't the end, not by a long shot, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally in control of my own story. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I wasn't going to let the past define me anymore. And maybe, just maybe, Adam and I could finally find a way back to each other. The drive to Adam's house was longer than I anticipated. The streets were unfamiliar, and every turn felt like I was heading further into the unknown. It wasn't just the distance. It was the weight of everything that had happened. I had no idea what to expect when I saw him again, and honestly, Part of me wasn't sure if I even wanted to. But the other part of me, the part that had spent the last few days reckoning with everything, knew that if I didn't go now, I'd never have the courage to go at all. When I pulled up to his place, I didn't see his car in the driveway, which sent a brief pang of disappointment through me. I told myself I would just leave if he wasn't home, but I didn't want to make it that easy. Instead, I took a deep breath and knocked. 3 sharp raps. I could hear the sound of footsteps from inside, and for a second, my heart stopped. The door opened slowly. Adam stood in the doorway, looking exactly the same as he had that night we'd said goodbye. Confused, conflicted, but still carrying that stubborn sadness I couldn't shake from my mind. His eyes widened when he saw me, and for a split second, I thought he might close the door in my face. But then he stepped back, just enough to let me in. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice strained. I nodded, forcing a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "I think I will be. I need to talk to you." Adam didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there watching me with a mix of caution and curiosity. He didn't invite me in, but he didn't ask me to leave either. It was like he wasn't sure if he should let me in anymore, or if it was even okay to have this conversation. "I don't want to rehash everything that happened," I started, stepping past him into the living room. "But I need you to know something." "Okay," he said softly, but I could tell he was bracing himself for whatever was coming next. "I've had time to think. Time to really think about everything," I said, my hands twisting in front of me. "I realized I've been blaming the wrong person for everything. I've been blaming you, blaming my parents, blaming everyone but the person who was really at fault. Me." Adam raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting that. "You? What do you mean?" "I mean, I let all of this happen," I said, sitting down on the edge of the couch. I ignored the signs. I turned a blind eye because it was easier than facing the truth. It was easier to pretend everything was fine than to deal with the fact that I was letting other people, my parents, Melissa, control the narrative. I looked up at him, meeting his eyes for the first time since I'd walked through the door. "I should have listened to you, Adam. I should have trusted you. You were always there, always honest, even when I wasn't. And I failed you. And I'm sorry." He stood there for a long moment, processing what I'd said. His eyes softened, just a little, but I could see the conflict still swirling inside him. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now, Jess," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You hurt me. You let me go without a fight. You," he shook his head, cutting himself off. "You let everything fall apart." "I know," I whispered, "and I can't fix it all at once. I don't even know where to start, but I want to try. I need you to know that I've learned from my mistakes. I don't want to live with this guilt anymore." Adam sat down beside me, not saying anything for a while. His hand was just a few inches away from mine, but he didn't reach for it. Instead, he stared at the floor, like he was waiting for something. "I never wanted to hurt you," I said, the words catching in my throat. "I know I did, but that was never my intention." He finally looked up at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a flicker of the Adam I remembered. The one who cared, the one who had always tried so hard to make everything work. "I don't know if we can just pick up where we left off," he said slowly, his voice rough. "But I don't want to keep running either. We have to figure this out, Jess." I nodded, a sense of relief washing over me. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. A very small start, but a start nonetheless. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes," I said. "We don't have to have all the answers right now. We just have to be honest, with each other and ourselves." He exhaled deeply, his shoulders slumping as if a weight had been lifted, even if just a little. "You've got a long way to go," he said, the corner of his mouth tugging up in a ghost of a smile. "I know," I said, "but I'm not giving up. Not this time." He was quiet for a moment, and I held my breath, waiting for him to say something more. Finally, he spoke. "Then let's take it one step at a time," he said. "That's all we can do." And with those words, a door that I thought was closed forever began to creak open again. It wasn't perfect, and I didn't expect it to be. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of hope that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. I didn't know what the future held for Adam and me, but I knew I wasn't ready to give up on him yet. I wasn't ready to give up on us.